This is OpenNMS 101 again, Module 7, Part A, SNMP Trap Configuration. The purpose of processing SNMP traps is to convert them into events, then notifications and/or alarms as necessary. The SNMP slide indicates that SNMP traps are sent from the network element to OpenNMS on port 162. The OpenNMS Horizon Reference Documentation Configurations Receive SNMP Traps and Informs indicates the Horizon services run as an unprivileged user and cannot bind on port numbers below 1024 without escalated privileges. For this reason, the default port for the SNMP Trap Inform listener is set to 10162 instead of the IANA registered port number 162. Instructions are then provided to enable port forwarding from 162 to 10162. Before making the change, the OpenNMS trap configuration file is /openNMS/opentrapd-configuration.xml. The SNMP trap port is 10162. The commands as directed by OpenNMS will be put into a file that will act as a script. A quick view of the firewall is in order. Masquerading is off. Execute the file as a script. Several success indicators will be printed. Review the firewall configuration. The UDP ports 162 and 10162 are open. Masquerading is on, and port forwarding from 162 to 10162 is set. For locally generated traffic, port forwarding is not enabled by this configuration. Google searches to enable port forwarding for locally generated traffic use the firewall-command direct option, which is deprecated. Therefore, SNMP Trap on the OpenNMS server will run directly against port 10162. This will be made clear in the examples. The SNMP Trap command has the following syntax: SNMP Trap-V2C or 3, Common Ops, Agent, Uptime, Trap OID, OID type, Value. -V2C or 3 indicates that SNMP V2 or V3 are being used respectively. The Common Ops are related to the SNMP version being used. The agent is the IPv4 address of the Trap Manager. In this case, from the local host, it is either 127.0.0.1:10162 or 192.168.159.105:10162. And from a remote network element, it is 192.168.159.105. The uptime is usually presented as two single quotes. The Trap OID, in this case, is made up. The private enterprise ID is 99,999. IANA has not yet reached that number. The OID, type, and value are a set and can be repeated. The type indicates that the value which follows is either an integer, an unsigned integer, counter, string, or anything else that follows. The list is given. Most SNMP trap commands will resemble the command in the center, which has been broken down into multiple lines in the lower left, and each element has been matched to the SNMP trap command elements in the lower right. First, try operating from a different server and sending a trap to the OpenNMS server. Most of this command should be familiar. DTG is a variable that will store the current date and time. 192.168.159.105 is the IPv4 address of the OpenNMS server. The Trap OID is based on the made-up private enterprise ID, 99,999. Pay attention to what happens to the 3 at the end of the Trap OID. The OID type and value follow. Note the inclusion of DTG in the value. This can help ID the trap in test cases. Send the trap. Switching to the OpenNMS server, note the trap has already made it to the OpenNMS events list. Click on Event ID 532. The node value is blank. The server that sent the trap is not in OpenNMS. any server can send a trap to OpenNMS. The interface is the SNMP Trap source IP address. The UEI is uei.openNMS.org/generic/traps/enterprise default. This is a default event for unknown SNMP traps. Log message assigns the value of 3 to a variable called specific and a value of 6 to a variable called generic. The 3 was the last number in the trap OID. The 6 is the default SNMP trap generic value. Scrolling down, OpenNMS provides a mask element for assigning this trap to an event in the future. The mask element will be covered later. Before going on, any node can send a trap to OpenNMS. OpenNMS can try to add an unknown node to itself when it receives a trap from such a node. This is configurable in trapd-configuration.xml. To make this happen, change new suspect on trap from false to true. This will not guarantee that OpenNMS will add the node, but it will try. Repeat the previous trap from the OpenNMS server, first using the address 192.168.159.105:10.162. Recall that forwarding from 162 to 10.162 will not work for local traffic. This is the same trap as before with a slight change for the host name and DTG in the value. Send the trap and return to the OpenNMS event list. The list may need to be refreshed. The trap shows up as an event. Click on the event ID 533. The node interface and log message are as expected, and scrolling down a bit, one finds the same mask element suggestion as given in the last example. Repeat the previous trap from the OpenNMS server. This time, use the loopback localhost address 127.0.0.1:10.162. Again, recall that forwarding from 162 to 10.162 will not work for local traffic. This is the same trap as in the previous example. Send the trap. Return to the OpenNMS events list page. The list page may need to be refreshed. The trap shows up as an event. Click on event ID 533. The node interface and log message are as expected, and scrolling down a bit, one finds the same mask element suggestion as given in the previous examples. Search for the generic traps enterprise default event, the default event that is covering for the heretofore unknown private enterprise trap 99,999. Begin in the /op/OpenNMS/etc/events directory. Search by using the grep command shown. The event is defined in OpenNMS.catch-all.events.xml. Edit OpenNMS.catch-all.events.xml. The plan is to copy the generic/traps/enterprise default definition to the Tutorial.events.xml file. Edit the definition to something suitable to the demonstrated traps. The mask element will be replaced by the mask suggested. The UEI will have to change, the event label will change, the description and log message will change. This is the mask suggested by generic/traps/enterprise default for the trap sent using the private enterprise ID of 99,999. Recall that the ID was 1.3.6.1.4.1.9999.88.77.3. Note that the 3 becomes a specific mask element. Edit Tutorial.events.xml. Without wasting time for the actual editing, this shows the completed event definition for the UEI, uei.tutorial.event/traps/general galaxy. The mask matches the enterprise default suggestion. The event label, description, and log message have all been modified. The severity and alarm data have not been modified. Having added an event definition, it is necessary to send an event reloading the event D daemon configuration. resend the 99,999.88.77.3 trap to the local host. Return to the GUI and check the events list. The event is already in the list with the UEI, uei.tutorial.events/traps/general-galaxy. Click on the event ID and note the changes to the UEI, log message, and description. This completes the conversion of an SNMP trap to an event. Because OpenNMS runs as a non-privileged user, OpenNMS cannot bind to the standard SNMP trap port 162. OpenNMS binds to port 10162, and the server is configured to forward port 162 traffic to port 10162. This forwarding works for remote network elements, but not for locally generated traffic. Locally generated SNMP traps must append :10162 to the agent IPv4 address. Unknown traps are assigned to the generic traps enterprise default event. Enterprise default events display a suggested mask to create an SNMP trap to event link. Creating the SNMP trap to event link is a matter of adding the mask element to an event definition. Up next, Module 7 continues with Part B, SNMP Traps, Varbinds, and V3.